welcome to episode 52 of Book Writing Tips, quick tips for new and seasoned authors. And I am your host, Alba Arango. In today's episode, I thought I would go back to the absolute very basics of how to actually start writing a book. So if you have never written a book before, or if you have written a book but you're thinking of writing a different book and maybe you want some different ideas of how to get that book started, don't worry, I've got you covered. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about how to start writing a book. Alrighty then. Today's episode will be in two parts as always. In part one, I want to talk about things I recommend you do ahead of time. So before you actually sit down to start penning that book, some suggestions I have of things to do ahead of time that can help you with actually getting that book started. And then in part two, I want to talk about a couple of different ways to actually start writing the book. So let's get to it. Part one. Things to do ahead of time. Now, of course, these are just suggestions, but they are things that I usually do ahead of time and things that I recommend if you've never written a book before, that they might be a good idea to do ahead of time. First thing I think that all writers should do before they sit down to write the book is decide on what type of book you actually want to write. Did you want to write an actual book, or did you want to write a script for a movie? Because those are actually two very different things. So if you're not really sure, then my suggestion would be, hey, start with just a story. And then once you've got the story kind of going, then decide which way you want to go and proceed from there. Because if you actually do want to write a script, then once you kind of get the story on in your head, I would advise switching over to a script writing software, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But okay, once you've decided which one you want to do, a book or a script, I'm going to go along with a book. All right, because that tends to be what people do first. So once you've chosen that you're going to write a book, then what kind of book? Is it going to be a kid's book or an adult book? And if it's going to be a kid's book, what age group? Are you writing for small kids, or are you writing for like 13 and older kids? And I wish you could all just attend the writers conference I'm going to be speaking at this week, because I actually have a whole section on deciding which of the 4 categories in kids books and what the difference is. But since most of you are not going to be at that conference, just do a little bit of research if you're going to be doing a kids book as to what age group you would like to write for. Or if you're going to be doing adult, then think about what genre within the adult market or within the YA market that you want to write for. Right now, the super hot is romantasy. And that's kind of the sort of new genre that's emerged in the past few years. And that would be a romantic fantasy. But that's like the hot topic right now. So if you're going to be pitching to agents, if you want to write a book in the next 6 months and you're going to start pitching it, look into romantasy. Maybe that's the direction you would like to go. But then again, maybe not. You don't want to do romantasy. You want to do sci-fi, or you want to do whatever it is, thriller, whatever it is you want to do. But decide on the genre that you want to write in. Because my next suggestion is, before you even start writing it, to start reading books that have been published in the last few years in that specific genre. So if you're going to be writing romantasy, hey, look at the hot new romantasy books coming out now. If you want to do thriller, look at the hot new thrillers coming out now. Please do not go back or think about things you read when you were a child to write a children's book, because the market has changed. Kids have changed and reading styles have changed. Even books that were thrillers 20 years ago are different than thrillers coming out now. And Agatha Christie, the queen of mystery, writing in her style today may not get you that deal that you were hoping for. So read books that are current in the genre you want to write in. And I would advise you keep doing that even after you've started writing your book, to keep you in that whole genre mindset. Just a suggestion, but I think it's a good one. So maybe think about that. All right. Now, once you kind of already know what's going on, like what genre you want to write in, think about what you want to write on. And what I mean by is what writing software you want to use. Now, Word and Google Docs are both perfectly acceptable. They're free. Most likely you already have it downloaded on your account. It probably came with your laptop. Either one is good and they're perfectly fine. If you want a little bit of extra help though, like a little bit more of some writing guidance or a little bit easier ways to organize your thoughts, your notes, whatever, then I would recommend, I know you, if you follow me at all, you already know this, that I use Scrivener and I love Scrivener. To me, it's the easiest one to help me organize my everything. There's also Pro Writing Aid. That's another one that's super popular. If you are doing only scripts, then I would recommend like Final Draft because that's kind of like the script writing software. But if you're not sure if you're going to do a book or a script, or if you want to do both, then I would do something like Scrivener because Scrivener also has a script writing. You can just say, hey, I want to start a new project and it's going to be a script and it's already done for you. That is one thing I know I've said it before. I do not recommend like Word for writing a script. It is much harder, much harder. I know because I did it and it is much harder. And once I got Scrivener, I was like, oh, it's so much easier. And then Final Draft is like super easy. So if you really want an easy one, that's it. But it's got a little bit of a price tag. All right. So once you have all of that, just a couple more suggestions. And one is before you sit down to write, I've done a whole podcast on this. I really think that you should set aside a time to write. Like choose when it's going to be because life gets in the way. So if you make it a priority, you really want to get that book started, then set aside a time. Like, okay, I've already made my decisions. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays between 4 and 4:30, I'm going to write. It's only an hour and a half a week, but I can do it those days at that time and nothing else is going to interrupt me. And once you have that focus, gosh, you're so ready to start writing. One last suggestion before I get into how to actually start the book, and that is this. If you are doing nonfiction, then before you actually sit down to write, I would get all of your research done, or at least a lot of your research done so that you know like how you're going to go about writing this book. Because nonfiction is very, very different than fiction. So you kind of need to know your stuff when you're writing this book, your how-tos, your research on whatever it is you're doing. You need to get at least a portion of that research done so that you can organize it and then start writing. All right, so let's do it. Let's talk about different ways to start writing your books. But before I get to that, it's time for the crazy law / writing prompt. And if you're new to the podcast, every week I give you a crazy law. And that is a law that once upon a time was a real law in history. And your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to write a story, like a short story, based on that law. So here we go. This week's crazy law. In Wichita, Kansas, mannequins may not be undressed in store windows unless curtains shut them away from public view. Oh dear, I'm a little afraid of some of the stories. Some of you are already thinking in your heads that you're going to write about this. So don't tell me. I don't want to know. I write kids fiction. Okay. Anyways, that's your crazy law. If you want to write a short story about it, go for it. You can always put that story, in your story box and then bring it out later to publish it somewhere. But for right now, let's get down to different ways to start writing that book. Let's start with nonfiction. Since I ended the last part on nonfiction, let's start with nonfiction. Now that you've got all this research done, it's time for the next step, which is to organize that research into either categories or chapters or however you're going to divide it, but start organizing your research. Now, all of this is before you actually write it because, again, nonfiction is different. So first of all, organize into the different chapters or categories. Then once you have done that and all your research has been divided into different categories or different chapters, now choose one of those categories or one of those chapters and then put it into some kind of an outline. And I'm telling you this because when you propose this to an agent or a publisher, they are going to ask for a book proposal. They actually don't want to see the full written book. They want to see a sample chapter that is written, and then they want to see all the chapters you're going to write and a brief outline of each one. And so that way, this is how you're getting started on writing your book, is by starting with those outlines. Start with one. Once you got that one done, then move on to the next category. And then once you've got like all of the categories, then choose one. And then you'll start actually turning that outline into a full chapter with words. But those are kind of the steps you need to take if you're writing nonfiction. Now, if you're writing memoir, I know that is nonfiction, but it is actually treated as fiction in the writing itself. So you're not going to be probably, splitting your slice of life, memoir into like categories. You already know the story. It happened to you. And remember that a memoir is a slice of life. So it's one part. It's not an autobiography. You're not telling your whole entire life story. It's one segment of your life that you want to share. So if you're writing memoir, you're going to kind of follow the same patterns as writing fiction. So let's get to fiction. Now, there's a couple different ways you can start your story with fiction. You kind of have to decide if you're going to be a plotter or a pantser, although it doesn't matter. You can be both. I've done both. So here are two different ways to kind of start your book. If you want to go the route of the plotter, someone who is organized, which is really not me, but I have done it, so I do know how it's done, then here's my suggestion for you. Start with a one-page outline of the entire story. This is going to take you a little bit of time because you're actually going to think of the entire story from beginning to end, and you're going to write it down in one little page, one short outline. So think about how you want to start the book. You want to start with, a lonely princess in her tower, and then, her and the stable boy take off on an adventure. Maybe she finds a treasure map and her and the stable boy take off on an adventure, and then they end up in this cave, and it, the cave of wonders kind of thing, and they solve a riddle, and now they've got clues that they have to find. So the next clue is going to lead them to here, and then the next clue leads them to here, and the next clue leads them to here. They confront the bad guy, and then boom, the end of the story. Whatever it is, a one-page outline of your story. Now, that isn't going to take you like 5 minutes to do unless you already know the entire story in your head. Then it will take you 5 minutes. But for the most part, you're probably going to spend that first Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 4 to 4:30 coming up with the main big ideas that you want to happen in this book. Then once you have that one-page outline, let's elaborate it into a bigger outline, maybe like 20 pages. So from the first point to the second point, from the princess alone in the tower to when her and the stable boy take off, what happens? The main things that happen, and start writing those like in points, in bullet points, even if you want them to be. On a sheet of paper, on the next sheet of paper. What happens once she and the stable boy take up? From there to the dragon's cave, what happens? What happens to them? So then you elaborate. And I will tell you for mine, in doing that, I actually did that for the young adult book that I have. And I wrote a single page outline for each of the 3 books I wanted to happen, because I wanted to know the main plot points in each of the 3 books before I wrote book 1. And then once I had that one-page outline for each of the 3 books for a trilogy, I took the first page outline and divided it and went through it. And this took a few days for me. I wrote a 20-page outline, and then I was able to write the book because I had an idea of where it could go. So that is an idea for you. If you want to be organized, write the one-page outline first. Please don't stress out if it takes you more than like 20 minutes. It probably is. It might take you a week. It might take you 2 weeks, because you're really coming up with the whole story into one page, with all the big major things that happen. Then go back and break it down. How did they get from point A to point B? How did they get from point B to point C? In just outline form, so you're not stressing about word usage. You're not stressing about, verbs, and you're not stressing about any of that. Then once you have all that down, then you sit down to actually write the book. But all of this is taking place during that, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 to 4:30 time frame, so that you are progressing in your book, but you're doing it in an organized way. Now, if you are not an organized person like I am not, then you are probably going to do more of like the pantser thing. And what I mean by that is you write by the seat of your pants. So my suggestion for that is this. You have the story idea in your head. Maybe it came from a dream. You had a dream about the princess and the stable boy being trapped inside of a dragon's cave, and his knowledge of, stable practices is what got them out of the dragon's lair. Maybe that's the only idea you have for the book, that scene. So my suggestion to you is write that scene. There is nothing written in stone, nowhere in any kind of writing, anything that says you have to start a story in the beginning. Write the scene you think of when you think of your book. Maybe it's the scene where the boy meets the girl. Maybe that's what you're thinking of. Or maybe you're thinking of when the killer is revealed at the end of the book. You know what? If that's the scene you think of, write the scene at the end of the book first. You can always fill in the rest later, but write the scene you think of when you think of your book. That's how to start the book. And then you've got that scene written. You've started your book, and it is so, so exciting. So now, how did the princess and the stable boy get into that cave? Write the scene that happens right before that scene. Or what happens when they escape? Do they fall into a mad, passionate, embrace? What happens next? And then what happens after that? And then what happens after that? Or what happens before that? Now, if that doesn't work for you, you've got that first scene written down, but you really don't know how they got there, or you don't know where to go from there. Then think of a different scene. How did the princess get with this stable boy? Did she stumble across him when she was escaping the castle to go on her adventure, and then he follows her? Did, the two of them discover this dragon's lair on a whim? They were going off exploring. How did she even come across the stable boy in the first place? Did she come across him when she went to steal a horse? Did she already know him? Is it like someone she's known since childhood? Did they just meet today? Write that scene. You don't have to write the scenes in order. I will tell you, I have a book that I have not worked on in probably 2 years, and that is what I'm doing with this book. It is a science fiction murder. It takes place on board a science fiction vessel like a starship, and this detective is sent to that starship to solve the murder. And I have written that book. So far, I probably have like 10 different scenes, maybe 11, all in different orders, because I keep thinking of different scenes. I know all the players because I have the character sheets, so I know who did it. And so now I'm just writing different scenes, and I love it. That's why one of the reasons I love Scrivener, because every time I go back to write a scene, I have to rethink about it, and I look at all the different scenes that I have, and I storyboard them, and like, ooh, I should write a scene that, happens here. But that is what I'm saying. You don't have to write scenes in order. So you've written the dragon's lair scene. Now write the scene where the princess and the stable boy meet. Write the end of it. Do they live happily ever after? Does the stable boy die? That would be sad, but maybe that's what you want to happen. Write different scenes and then connect them, weave them together. And then once you have the scenes written together, your book is coming together. So these are just a few different ways that you can start your book so you have your book started, because that is what is so exciting about writing a book, is that you have this book. So there you go. And if you guys have some more ideas for how to start a book, please feel free to drop them in the comments so other people can see them. And that's it for this week. If you want to follow me, I would appreciate it. And that way you're always kept up to date when I post a new episode, which I post every single Wednesday. So my next episode will drop next week. And until next week, I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week, and you are safe, and that you are starting or thinking about how to start a new book. Take care, everyone.